In the world of smartphones, we are used to very small improvements year on year, like maybe 5% or 10% better battery life or better performance or better energy efficiency. And that's just the way the industry's always been. So we're comfortable with those small gains every year. But the next generation of phones are quite different because there's a chip from Qualcomm, the Snapdragon 8 Elite, that just changes the whole landscape of what this is like. Okay, so I was able to test two phones. The first phone is this one. This is the OnePlus 13. Now this is the Chinese edition of this phone. So I wasn't even gonna do a review of it. I got it in and I threw some games on it and I was immediately aware of just how much better the battery life was on this device, the OnePlus 13, compared to the OnePlus 12. But this has a 6,000 milliamp hour battery versus the 5,400 we see on the OnePlus 12. And also they're running different screens. This has the kind of curved edge we've seen on a lot of OnePlus devices. This is the new flat front with the kind of rounded edges, but it's just a new screen tech that has local variable refresh rates. So you can have different portions of the screen with different refresh rates depending on what's moving and what's not on the screen at any given time. So it just gives you much better, at least the possibility for better energy efficiency. And also they're running different software. This is running ColorOS because it's China, and this is running OxygenOS because this is like the global North American version. And I'm like, these are just not great devices for doing comparison of how good or how different the new chip is. But then I got in these phones, the ROG Phone 9 Pro. Now this device is pretty much a clone to last year's ROG Phone 8 Pro in the sense that it's got the same shape, same design, same screen even. The new one does go to a higher refresh rate if you set it in the options, but the battery on the ROG Phone 9 is around 5 to 6% bigger. It's not exactly the same, but it's close. And when I ran my battery tests on these phones, it's clear that the Snapdragon 8 Elite gives you so much more battery life than the Snapdragon 8 Gen 3. Like we're talking, I'm gonna say 25 to 30% is a conservative estimate. I think for a lot of phones out there, if you match everything equal, it's probably closer to 40%. It is a massive increase in battery life. And it's particularly impressive if you go back a few years and just see how big of a jump this really is. Now, all of this benchmarking you've seen for battery is on the heavier workloads. Like if you push this thing on multi-core performance, or if you're just doing a lot of stuff or playing heavy games and stuff, you'll notice really big gains. For single core tasks, like if you're just browsing Reddit for long periods of time, it's not as impressive in terms of year-on-year gains, but it's still a significant improvement over the previous generation. But any device that uses one of these new Snapdragon 8 Elite chips is gonna see a big jump in battery life. It's just, like when was the last time we've seen a 30% increase in battery life in one generation of chip? Like it's just, it really has never been a thing for me. The other thing to keep in mind, I think that, we're only looking at the Snapdragon 8 Elite chips, like the top end stuff. I imagine this trickles down to their mid-tier and entry-level chips as well. Maybe not next year, hopefully, but I think this technology just improves the entire lineup from Qualcomm soon. Now, the reason for these big battery life gains is that this new chip, Snapdragon 8 Elite, is more energy efficient than the previous generation. And we've seen really good single core and multi-core efficiency in terms of the CPU, but the thing that was most impressive to me was the GPU. So there's a game called Genshin Impact. It's an old game at this point, but every time a new chip comes out, I like to take Genshin and run it on those new chips just to see how far you can push that chip before it drops in performance, because this is a game that loves GPU power. It's a very demanding title, and typically any phone that you throw at this game will eventually throttle down. Like the game will play these really nice graphics for a good amount of time, and then at some point the phone gets hot and it has to lower its performance just to be able to keep up with the thermal constraints of the system. But on both of these phones, the OnePlus 13 and the ROG Phone 9, it never throttled. Like it seems you can play Genshin at max graphics indefinitely at 60 frames per second. It's something special. Now the OnePlus 13 is running slightly slower RAM than the RAM that's inside the ROG Phone 9 Pro, but both devices can do it. They never got warm enough that they needed to throttle. One thing to keep in mind, I am in Canada. It's November. It's relatively cool right now. So if you live in like a super hot country, obviously you won't be able to do this, but I've never seen this on like stock devices without using the cooler or anything on the ROG phone. Both of these phones are engineered with really good thermal solutions on the inside, like they have graphite sheets and stuff, but it's mostly the chip that's doing the heavy lifting. Like it's just a really energy efficient chip. But also with energy efficiency, you get long battery life, but you also get long battery like longevity in terms of like battery health, because you know how a lot of phones have the ability to control the charge limit. You can drop it down to like 80%. When you have a really big and long-lasting battery and you drop it down to 80%, it's still a very long-lasting battery. And then now you just, right, you're just putting less wear and tear on your charge cycles because you can comfortably drop it down to 80% without worrying about it lasting a day and a half. Okay, there you have it, the Snapdragon chips. I was wildly impressed. The battery life is not something that I ever thought that Qualcomm would be able to fix so quickly in just one generation and still call it like the Snapdragon 8. Like I thought they'd have like a whole different naming moniker. But yeah, it looks really good this year. Very promising. All right, hope you guys enjoyed this video.